The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, currently remains as the world's most powerful military alliance, with 29 countries abiding to the treaty. The most important aspect of the alliance is that of Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, which states that an armed attack against one of its members is considered an attack on them all. Article 5 of the NATO Treaty was only invoked once in history, by that of the United States, following the September 11th attacks in 2001. This prompted NATO's 19 current members at that time to invade Afghanistan and topple its Taliban government for harboring the terrorists who were responsible for the September 11th attacks. However, unlike in 2001, NATO today has 29 members that span across North America and Europe. However, there may be more countries who are unofficially included within NATO than what is thought due to the means of defense loopholes. In today's video, we will be discussing what exactly a defense loophole is and find out if they actually exist. Are there more countries in NATO than we actually think there are? But first, let's revert back to Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. An attack on one is considered an attack on them all, meaning that if one member nation were to become under attack by a foreign entity and declare a defensive act of war, then all other members of the treaty would declare a defensive act of war as well and go to the aid of their attacked ally. However, would a NATO member country declaring a defensive act of war also enact their other external military alliances and create a defensive loophole outside that of NATO? Will this mean that there are more countries unofficially a part of NATO than what we think? Let's set up a hypothetical scenario to test this. Poland does something to anger that of Russia. Poland's actions then cause Russia to attack Poland through Kaliningrad. Russia's attack then prompts Poland to declare a defensive act of war and invoke Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, which brings 28 other countries into the conflict. Back in 2010, the European Union adopted a military treaty similar to that of NATO. With Poland also being part of the European Union and its defense system, 6 other countries would be involved on NATO's side of the conflict. But wait, if NATO as a whole just declared a defensive act of war, that means the United States just did as well. With the United States declaring a defensive act of war, they too would invoke any non-NATO military alliance that they hold as well. This would invoke the US-led Hemispheric Defense Pact known as the Rio Treaty, a mutual defense agreement with the United States and most of Latin America. And Zeus, a mutual defense agreement between the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, would also be invoked. And any other mutual defense agreements that the United States holds with other countries, such as South Korea, Japan, Israel, and the Philippines, would also be invoked. With all of the United States' external treaties, an additional 22 countries would be dragged into this conflict. Malaysia and Singapore would also be dragged into the conflict due to their mutual defense pacts with the other NATO member of the United Kingdom. So yes, theoretically, these 53 countries would be at one another's defense in such a war, but this doesn't necessarily mean that they will abide to their treaties. However, countries from that of the Rio Treaty would be extremely reluctant to join a European conflict at the aid of Poland, even if the Rio Treaty was invoked by the United States. A similar situation happened back in 2001, when the United States invoked the Rio Treaty following the September 11th attacks, where only a few member countries kept their word and aided the invasion of Afghanistan, therefore making the treaty quite unreliable. Other countries brought in via loopholes such as Malaysia and Singapore would also have difficulty putting themselves into such a war. Even if such a defensive loophole does exist, we would only find out the truth if a major conflict were to break out in the near future. Thank you for watching today's video. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you have any video suggestions that you would like us to cover. See you guys soon.